Good evening, all. Sprocket Simulations here. Today we're going to be doing a sort of mini review, first flight of the Aeroplane Heaven 140, Cessna 140. This is kind of an iconic aircraft that sort of brought general aviation to the masses. It was sort of introduced along with the Cessna 120. Started production in 1946. I believe the first flight, though, is credited to the 120, which was in 1945. The main difference between the two is going to be that the 120 is sort of a stripped down version of the 140. So the 120 didn't have any retractable flaps. The interior was sort of rudimentary and uncomfortable. And this also has those nice D-shaped sort of three-quarter windows on the 140. They made another variation of the 140 called the 140A, and the main difference there is that if we come up to the top of the wing here, you notice that the main body, fuselage, and leading edges are all aluminum, but if you look at the wing, that is actually fabric on the top still. So the 140A, I don't know what year that got released. I think it was around 1949 or so. Had an all metal body, where this one still has a little bit of fabric on the upper part of the wing. So as far as overall textures, modeling, and everything goes from Aeroplane Heaven, I would give it a good rating. It's definitely not bad. It's just not great or fantastic. You can see this is what I call good from far, but far from good. So if we zoom out and sort of do the same sort of panning, it looks great. But once we zoom in, you can see that the textures are a little low res. So I'm looking down here at this sort of stuff where you can definitely see, you know, the transition between that front piece there does not blend at all. It's also, it just looks a little, you know, lower quality. But it, like I said, it is good. It's not bad by any means. It's just not quite as high quality as some of the other aircraft you can purchase. This is where I think this aircraft really shines, is inside. I just love this era of aircraft with this Art Deco style. I mean, you've got piano keys, chrome piano keys for your electronics and lights. You've got these chrome dials next to this sort of, you know, like colored painted horrible plastic, you know, like it's this you know, just cool era. And actually this might even be metal back then, where I'm picturing those old late 40s toys, you know, where they had that sort of paint on them that would flake away and chip. You know, the coloring that they have on the actual yoke here is that, you know, like it just makes me think of like old Tupperware lids, or, you know, like it's just horribly wonderful, and I really, really enjoy it. There is 7 liveries for this aircraft. There is also the version that we're in now. Let's go ahead and just open up the door real quick and we will walk back outside. There's the version that we're in now with the spats. So you do have the wheel spats on. Now, something that I think might confuse a lot of people with this aircraft is that you can select like the Tundra model or the non-fairing model or the normal model, and you get into the aircraft and you're like, why are the wheels not correct? Or you can be like, I'm flying mid-flight and all of a sudden the wheels changed. Well, the way to actually change the wheels is by clicking on the pilot side or the left side wheel, and you can change the wheels whenever you want. So what happens a lot of time, I think anyways, is that the door doesn't need to be open. You do not need to be outside. We'll come on back in here. Notice that little hand symbol is still there over the wheel. So right now we have the fairings on. I'll click it, open the door. Oh, they're not down there anymore. We can close the door. Click it, open it up. Now we've got our big fat Tundra wheels on. So just something to be aware of, that if you're, maybe moving with your mouse to look around and then you accidentally click and you're like, why are my wheels changed? That's why. We'll go through a quick startup procedure here. I'm not going to go through a full checklist. You do have a full checklist printed here, and also Aeroplane Heaven was nice enough to actually include a full checklist in the actual simulator, so you can follow along with that. But what I'm going to do is go ahead and get these beautiful, horrible controls out of the way. And then we're going to go ahead and get fired up. Currently, we're sitting in Front Royal, Virginia, which is sort of northwestern Virginia, pretty close to the border of West Virginia. We're going to fly south down the Fort Valley, sort of following the Shenandoah River to a small town called Luray, and land at the airport there. So one thing I want to address real quick about this aircraft that I've seen addressed on other YouTubers' reviews is how loud it is in the inside. It is extremely loud. Aeroplane Heaven has responded to some comments about it, saying this is what has been reported from real world pilots, that it is loud in there because of the position of the the position of the engine, and where the sort of the exhaust is, and how everything is on this aircraft, that it is loud, which I totally get. I understand it's going to be loud, but watch what happens if I come outside. It is so quiet. It is so quiet. The other thing that what I think has happened, and what I think they've done, is that they have made this engine noise the same as if you were to have your door or window open, and there's no difference when the door or window is open. So for example, typically when you open your window, the engine noise changes tone, gets a little louder, as you would expect. No difference, right? No difference. So I think what's going on is that they have just set one volume for the engine, regardless if the windows or doors are open, and that doesn't quite match up with how quiet it is on the outside. So that's just a small little piece there. What I'm going to actually do though is I'm going to go ahead and turn down the volume even more. Oops, I went to control options here. We want to go to general options. You'll see how low I've already got it. So sound, we're at 7. So we're just going to drop it down to 5. Fly, go back. That's, I mean, it's still loud, but man. So we're going to go ahead and get our taxi. We're going to take off, and we're just going to fly south. We do have these big old weights tied down to us right now. This, I guess, fictitious knob, you push that in, gets rid of them. I also have some custom views set up for my normal flight. Nose up, controls, checklist, and then looking at your fuel gauges. The fuel gauges in this are important because They do not change, and you are selected to either right or left, so you want to make sure you keep an eye on those to stay level. So we'll go ahead and stay up in this view here, and we will get our taxi underway. So we'll come on down here and we will release the parking brake. We want to make sure we have also our let me put on my brakes real quick here, our beacon and our nav light on. I just love this. I mean, how cool is that? Look at it. Cessna 140. Chrome grill with piano keys. Very cool, very cool. All right, so we'll come back up, and we're just going to go ahead and taxi on over. Now, like any tail dragger, which I think you guys are going to understand that I actually really enjoy flying tail draggers. They're just a rewarding plane to fly. They are difficult though. There's challenges to taking off to landing, your views, you know, looking over the nose like this to taxi. But we'll go ahead and hold short here. I just want to go over one other thing before we get rolling. I'm going to go ahead and oh, that's the starter. We can push that back in. Parking brake. There we go. So I also spoke to Aeroplane Heaven through some emails about, come on down, come all the way over here, about what we got going on here. So they've included an autopilot, and then you have this here, which is your COM 1, which is, there's only one communications in it. This is going to be your dial knob, right? So you can go through and select your standby, and this is for the sort of outer frequency. This does nothing, and volume is your swap button, okay? Now, if you come over and you turn on Master Avionics, you get a Garmin 430 and a Garmin 328 transponder. You notice it's not centered, it doesn't quite fit in this bezel, it's just kind of tossed in there. The autopilot, well, technically it works. There's a few issues that are going on with it, where one, you have your heading, okay, but there is no heading bug. Sorry, I'm bouncing all over here. You don't have a CDI in this aircraft to see where you're heading. There's no heading bug on a 430. So you can turn this all day long, and you're not going to know what you're pointing at. You can obviously click it to center it and then turn off of that, but you still don't know exactly what you're setting it to. Same thing with altitude selection. You can sit here and spin this all day long, but there's nothing giving you an indication of what you are setting it at. Now, vertical speed, you can see there is a vertical speed button. Let's come on back down here. It's going to take me a second to come over. All right. There's a vertical speed button that you cannot push, but yet you can put an indicated airspeed button. And same again, the rolling knob does not work. You have a flight director. For what? I'm not entirely sure, because there's nothing to display a flight director on. But you can fly level. If you have a flight plan in the 430, you can do nav. If you are tuned to an ILS or an RNAV, you can select approach. And like I said, you can fly heading if you sort of center click it and then slowly adjust accordingly from there. So it's like half implemented, right? It's there, but it's not. It doesn't quite make sense. So, like I was saying, I emailed Aeroplane Heaven about it, and they basically said we've learned our lesson not to add avionics, modern avionics, into aircraft that weren't designed for them. I basically responded with, can we at least get a CDI and a nav, just so we can tune some frequencies? That's it. Because otherwise, this aircraft is, you're basically just able to look at these and fly strictly VFR. You can't even do VOR navigation, you can't do ADF, you can't do NDMEs, you can't do anything. So, and they even say most of these have been modified to be updated. They don't specifically say for avionics, but so what I typically do in this plane, which I think you should do anyways, I know it sounds like I'm whining and complaining about it, but what you should be doing in this plane anyways is flying VFR. So with that being said, we do need 10 degrees flaps for takeoff. Also on the trim wheel, which is down here, I like to set that so that way the takeoff is at the bottom of the red takeoff range. It just helps with the tail dragger and actually get it into the air a little bit easier. So we'll go ahead and release the parking brake here. We're lined up to taxi onto runway 28, and we're going to be making a right turn to head south down Fort Valley to Luray. Now this thing taxis very nicely. It's smooth, it responds well. You can spin it on a dime if you want to. So we'll go ahead and line up here. Now anytime you apply the brakes, pull back on your elevator, otherwise that nose is going to dip forward. So, normal talk about tail draggers. Smooth is the key. You don't want to be doing a whole bunch of drastic left and right inputs on the rudder pedals. I know it feels like the aircraft is going to be shooting one direction and you need to correct it. Just do the smallest amount possible and just think smooth, 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 and you'll get in the air nicely. So we're going to go ahead and same again, just smoothly apply that power. There we are at full throttle. There comes the tail. I'm barely touching the rudder to have this sort of correct itself, and we can go ahead and pull up. Perfect. We can go ahead and come on down to our normal flight view. We can go ahead and bring up our flaps. And then we can start to sort of like trim for our climb. We've passed the end of the runway, so we can go ahead and start to make our right turn to the south. Now this is quoted at climbing out at around 650 feet per minute at around 80 to 85 miles an hour. I found that to be pretty accurate, especially once now you can look over at our RPMs and listen to the engine, and we've got it just like pegged. It is just at full RPMs in the yellow red, so I like to just back it off just a little bit. It sounds so much better. No need to stress it. And we're just gonna level off around 2,000 feet and get into a nice little cruise here. Yeah, we've gone a little bit past 2,000 feet. I'm just going to go ahead and back the throttle off. I'm going to be setting for around 2,400 RPMs. a normal cruise speed on this is marked at 105 miles an hour. I don't know if we're gonna get that much out of it, but we shall see once we fully level off. We're at a relatively low altitude, and I'm doing kind of a moderate cruise here of around 2300 RPMs. This is a cool little valley. This is known as Fort Valley. You've got Shenandoah National Park off to our left there, and then off to our right here is sort of like the Massanutten Ridge that follows basically parallel with Shenandoah National Park. Now you can see it's been an easy plane to fly. I'm basically just enjoying this. The best way I can describe this plane is sort of like driving an old Cadillac. It's not responsive, it's not fast, but it's comfy and lazy. So just, you know, like I've been flying this whole time pretty much with just one hand on the yoke. Just sort of like meandering around, you know, just one finger on the top of the yoke to turn it back over. And it just feels comfy. Now, it's obviously no speed demon. But if you really want to push it, you know, you can really bank it over and start to really get into some tight turns, and it's going to do just fine. And I'd say that the responsiveness of that is, well, at least it feels correct to me. I don't know if it is, but it feels appropriate for this plane. Same with doing sort of diving down the nose and bringing it back up. The way the speed increases and decreases with that feels appropriate. It's keeping us back around 2,000 feet here. It just sort of, you know, there's a reason this plane became one of the most popular trainers of its day. Is it's forgiving to fly. I wouldn't say it's easy to fly, it's forgiving to fly. So, you know, there's all these stories of, you know, back when some of these planes used to have like a manual start of, you know, there wasn't a starter, or say the starter wasn't working, you had to spin the prop and the wheels weren't chalked, and next thing you know, the Cessna took off and was flying on its own, and it flew and flew and flew until it ran out of gas. That's what this plane would do. If it had a straight enough spot in front of it and you just let it do its thing, it'd take off and it would just fly and fly and fly. And that's what this plane feels like it could do. I mean, you can... I didn't really even touch my trim after doing those little maneuvers. It just settled right back down where I wanted it to. I won't really go over the autopilot in this. If you guys really want me to, I will do an autopilot video for this aircraft, but I would strongly suggest flying it like I am now, of just enjoying the scenery. So all I'm doing right now, which is a cool little area, is the Shenandoah River is pretty unique in that all it does is it snakes its way down this entire valley. Just right, horseshoe bend, left, horseshoe bend, right, horseshoe bend, and it just does that all the way up the valley. You can also see while I was out doing some little camera shots there, we really didn't lose much altitude at all. So that just shows you how stable this aircraft is. So one thing that I mentioned before we took off, which I haven't been paying attention to, is our fuel. So notice how much of our left fuel tank we've used, and our right is still full. We're going to start having a right sort of bank happening because I haven't swapped those over. So all you need to do is come down to your fuel selector here and click it over, and then we've just swapped tanks to try and even those out. Now I probably waited too late in the flight to do that, but that is definitely something you want to keep an eye on. You don't want that to really get away from you, because all of a sudden you're like, why am I banking so much this way? Well, it's because you have basically drained your left tank and your right tank is full. So don't be like me and keep an eye on those fuel tanks. Now the interior of this also has some lights. You do have here, click that on, and here you do have some lights. They're hard to see right now, but it does sort of illuminate the dash. So we're going to carry on down the valley here just for a little bit longer. I can see Luray Airport here in the distance, and we'll join back up once we're sort of lined up, and we're going to do a left traffic pattern and come in and land this direction. So I'm going to go ahead and bring the power back here a little bit. We've got Luray Airport just off to our side here. It's kind of hard to see with the sun. There you go. I'm going to try and do kind of a low pass and see if I can't spot the windsock to see if we need to land in this direction or not. Otherwise we'll do a sort of a big loop around and come land on probably runway 23, maybe a 21. Let's see. 22, runway 22. So we should be seeing the windsock here soon. There's the windsock. So we do want to come around to runway 22. We're going to do a big old loop around. Go ahead and level off here. We'll keep it around 1,500 feet. We'll go ahead and start our turn now. Beam those numbers, we'll go ahead and start to really slow down. Okay, we're about 45 degrees of the end of the runway, which means we can make our turn onto base. And we're just going to do a nice gentle turn over. We're going pretty slow. I'm bringing a little bit of throttle. An eye out the window here. I have the poppy lights where we already are at the correct altitude. You can see right here what I'm looking at is that we're 2 white, 2 red. So we're at a good altitude already. If you go to 4 white, you're too high. 4 red, you're too low. Again, I'm just going to do a nice gentle turn. So now you can see I'm actually a little too low. I dropped some altitude. Now also keep in mind that these lights are set for basically being parallel to where the lights are at. In smaller aircraft like this, we're going to kind of aim for in front of those, so you're going to see that it's going to be essentially too low. But it's something to keep in mind because it helps you on your initial approach to make sure you're not going to be hitting these trees, that you're on the right path, and that if you start to see them going white or going red, that you know you need to make small adjustments. So right there, they went white, so I'm going to dip down, start to lose a little bit of airspeed. Hopefully we'll pick it back up again. There we go. And then you want to sort of start to level off again. We're going to go ahead and do another notch of flaps. Should be at full flaps now. We're bouncing around between too high and correct, which is okay. I'm going to go ahead and start to bring the throttle back. Now, same again, what I've talked about in my other videos as far as tail draggers go. You always want to do a wheeled landing, not on pavement surfaces. You want to do a wheeled landing. You don't want to do sort of a stalled landing or three-wheeled landing. So you want to keep a little bit of speed in. You're going to come in, lead that speed off. Dancing on the pedals a little bit. The tail's going to drop naturally. There, that tail just touched down. Now we can pull back on the elevator and put on our brakes. Slow it down. Very minimal brakes. And then we can bring up our flaps. We can go ahead and turn off. So, overall, I would say that this is a fantastic plane to add to your collection. I enjoy flying it very, very much. I think it has a good flight model. There's just a few things that I think should be changed. One, they either need to re-implement a better autopilot navigation system. I think if they just stuck to more of a CDI than a GPS with a nav stack, even if it's just, you know, nav 1 for you to tune a frequency, that would be fantastic. And then the other thing is the sound. The cockpit is just way too loud, especially when you compare it to the outside sound. So, like I demonstrated, I think it is down to the windows, doors not having an effect on the sound. So essentially it's like they're open all the time. But I'm no programmer. I don't know if that's correct or not. That is just my assumption. But overall, I would say that this is definitely worth purchasing. I wish it was about $5 cheaper though, or even $8 cheaper, and bring it down to $19.99 instead of the $28.95 that it is. I also wish it was on the marketplace so I wouldn't have to worry about checking for updates. They say they email you, but you're always like, nah, I need to check to see if I have the latest version of it. But overall, fantastic plane. I think anybody who likes tail draggers of this era will get a lot of enjoyment out of it. So you can go to aeroplaneheaven.com. I'll put a link down below for you to check it out. As always, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. It definitely helps me grow this channel. For that, I hope you have wonderful flights and silky smooth landings. Until next time, this is Sprocket Simulations, over and out.